Want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic.
Good morning, everyone. That's Greta Thunberg. And here's the tweet that set it all off this weekend. Mr. Bernier says, "Delusion, manipulation, irrationality, hypocrisy. Get ready for media frenzy and mass hysteria as climate alarmist cult saint. Greta Thunberg brings her apocalyptic message to the US and Canada." So, I want you to panic. That seems pretty apocalyptic. Here's Greta, and I want to point out the timeline here. This is 11:09 a.m., August 31st, and here's a tweet that Greta sends out at 5:44 p.m. She says, "When haters go after your looks and differences, it means they have nowhere left to go. And then you know you're winning. I have Asperger's, and that means I'm sometimes a bit different from the norm, and given the right circumstances, being different is a superpower. I'm not public about my diagnosis to hide behind it, but because I know many ignorant people still see it as an illness or something negative. And believe me, my diagnosis has limited me before. Before I started school striking, I had no energy, no friends, and I didn't speak to anyone. I just sat alone at home with an eating disorder. All of that is gone now, since I've found a meaning in a world that sometimes seems shallow and meaningless to so many people." Okay, so in this, she states that she's got an eating disorder, Asperger's, depression, and other various mental health issues. Very, very clearly. That is very, very clear. So here is Gerald Butts clipping the first response, because he doesn't actually respond directly to Maxime Bernier. He takes a picture of the tweet from his phone. And the reason he does that is so that there's no connection between him and Bernier directly, right? And he says, "Right-wing populists the world over are attacking a 16-year-old who's fighting for a safer climate for herself and her generation. Here's the Canadian lead guitarist in that band, Climate Change," or hashtag Climate Change. And he's referring to Mr. Bernier. And Mr. Bernier responds, "Left-wing climate alarmists the world over shamelessly use a 16-year-old to spread their lies. She's supposedly old and responsible enough to discuss the important issues, but when she gets criticized, they accuse you of attacking a young girl. Typical neo-Marxist manipulation." And then I'm just going to back it up here because it's easier. I'm just trying to go over this to get everybody up to speed. Mr. Butts responds, "I think Mr. Bernier's Twitter feed is being run by my critical theory TA from undergrad. I'll play along, blah, blah, blah," because I went over this the other day if you want to watch my analysis of Mr. Butts' response here. And Mr. Bernier ends this little skirmish by saying, "Either Greta Thunberg is a grown-up and in control of her life, in which case she can be criticized like anyone for the nonsense she spreads, or she's a poor little autistic girl, and then those who manipulate her are despicable child abusers. Pick one explanation and stick to it. You can't have it both ways. You can't march her out and say, 'Look, everything she says is true, and she's our mouthpiece, and she's the person who represents our movement, and yay, Greta, everything's great.' And then when somebody criticizes her, say, 'Hold on a second, she's got autism, don't you know?' You can't do that. You can't have it both ways. They're trying to, and they're trying to shame Mr. Bernier for pointing out the hypocrisy of the transatlantic trip, which actually cost a lot more CO2 than your average flight. If she had flown coach, the plane would have gone anyway, right? I'm sure the United Nations would still let her speak. Okay, here's Mr. Bernier again. "If she's just a child, why should we care about her immature and simplistic opinion on policies that affect millions? Why is she invited to the UN and getting massive media coverage? How convenient that we can't criticize this alarmist child urging everyone to panic." And this is in response to Charles Adler saying, "How good does it feel, Maxime Bernier, to cyberbully a child? Grab that shield and stick to it, right? How dare you shame a child for her simplistic beliefs, but let's create policy around them." Here's Mr. Bernier again. "Climate alarmists are using children to spread their propaganda for the same reason some terrorists are using them as shields, to hide behind them and protect themselves from any attack. They are morally bankrupt cowards. That's what you are, Butts." And this is in response to the right-wing populist thing. I know we're getting into it, but at the same time, "Watch this video," says Mr. Bernier. "I don't want your hope. I want you to panic," says mentally unstable Greta Thunberg. It just boggles the mind. It's just mind-boggling, that such nonsense is now being taken seriously as a basis for policy. Our leftist political and media elites have gone crazy. Here's that same video, and this is the part where she talks about "I want you to panic." It's just a longer clip, and this gives context. This is what they're pushing. This is what they want. This is what Butts wants. Here we go.
We must change almost everything in our current societies. The bigger your carbon footprint is, the bigger your moral duty. The bigger your platform, the bigger your responsibility. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act.
I'm going to cut it off there. You can watch the whole thing. The link's in the description. But my point is, that's not stable. Being autistic and having depression and having an eating disorder, that's not mentally stable. And mentally stable is not an insult. If somebody says, you're not mentally stable, if you have depression and autism and an eating disorder, that is a descriptive term. You are being described accurately if somebody says you are not mentally stable, because that's true. Here's Patrick Moore, the former founder of Greenpeace, no longer with Greenpeace, and he says, the only Canadian leader who calls out the insanity of worshipping a 16-year-old girl for her utterances on the most important scientific and political questions of the day. Here is a further, this is the Sunday morning, September 2nd, Monday morning, tweet storm that Mr. Bernier continued. He says, 1. Greta Thunberg has become the international mascot for climate alarmism. The goal of the Green Left is to radically transform our society through hysterical fear that the end of the world is coming and we have no choice but to give up our freedoms and way of life. 2, their agenda is clear. Thunberg, quote, we must change everything in our current society. They want to make us poorer and restrict everything from housing, transportation, food, travel, and what we consume, to even having babies. 3, they don't care about democracy and say there's no time left for debate. Opposition or expression of doubt must be silenced. We must make those radical changes now. They use Greta as a convenient shield. The mob accuses those criticizing her of bullying an autistic child. 4, Greta Thunberg is clearly mentally unstable, not only autistic, but obsessive-compulsive, eating disorder, depression, and lethargy. And she lives in a constant state of fear. She wants us to feel she wants us to feel the same. Quote, I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I fear every day. Oh my goodness. Sorry, everyone. I've read this and I'm tripping all over it. I apologize. 5, the Green leftists want us to focus on the feelings of this girl so as to prevent any debate on the radical ideology she is pushing. But she and her parents are responsible for making her an international figure at the center of political controversies, not the rest of us. 6, my concern is not for Greta Thunberg's feelings, but for the millions of Canadians and people in other countries who will be poorer, will suffer, and have their lives upended if we let her and the movement she represents impose their radical ideas. 7, I'm also concerned about all the children that Greta Thunberg has irresponsibly encouraged to skip school, or who have become more anxious, distressed, and in some cases suicidal because they believe they have no future. 8, whether or not Greta Thunberg is being manipulated is her and her parents' problem. She has been an influential figure in a movement that is a threat to our prosperity and civilization. If she wants to play that role, she should be denounced and attacked. So here is a news article based on that tweet storm from Global News at 3:48 p.m. They got it out quick. The tweet storm was sent out early, 1:37 p.m. on the same day. So they were waiting. And their headline is Maxime Bernier calls teen climate activist mentally unstable. Descriptive term. Global. People's Party of Canada leader Maxime Bernier has doubled down after attempting to discredit an internationally recognized teenage climate change activist by calling her mentally unstable. After facing scorn on Twitter for his remarks on Greta Thunberg on Sunday, Bernier did not back down in an 8-part tweet storm the following day. He called Thunberg the international mascot for climate alarmism and claimed she is being used as a convenient shield by the left. At Greta Thunberg is clearly mentally unstable, he tweeted, not only autistic, but obsessive-compulsive eating disorder, depression, and lethargy. And she lives in a constant state of fear. She wants us to feel the same. Quote, I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I fear every day. I got it that time. My concern is not for Greta Thunberg's feelings, but for the millions of Canadians and people in other countries who will be poorer, will suffer, and have their lives upended if we let her and the movement she represents impose their radical ideas, he later added. And I scroll down and there's kind of links to tweets, but it's not the whole tweet stream, just the first one. They don't put the whole tweet stream in context here. It's really, hey, that's the media not helping Mr. Bernier. Back to the article. Thunberg, a 16-year-old from Sweden, became a European celebrity last year when she refused to go to school in the weeks before the country's general election to highlight the impact of climate change. She recently completed a zero-carbon transatlantic voyage to attend a New York climate change conference. No, she didn't. It wasn't zero carbon. There was 2 people who flew over to pilot the boat back. The boat is made of carbon. There was another pilot on board. There was a captain on board. He consumed carbon. Come on. Garbage. Back to the article. She's open about having Asperger's syndrome and recently said on Twitter, quote, "When haters go after your looks and differences, it means they have nowhere left to go. And then you know you're winning. Quote, before I started school, I had no energy, no friends, and I didn't speak to anyone. I just sat alone at home with an eating disorder. All of that is gone now since I have found a meaning in a world that sometimes seems shallow and meaningless to so many people." Wow. Bernier, who has represented the riding of Beauce federally since 2006, plans to run a full slate of candidates in the upcoming federal election under his People Party banner. The People's Party refuses to accept the scientific consensus that global warming caused by human activity has put the future of the planet in serious jeopardy, according to its platform on the environment. Quote, "Many renowned scientists continue to challenge this theory," it states. That's one line in goodness, what lazy journalism. Anyway, asked for comment about its leaders' statements, People's Party Canada spokesman Martin Mass said the tweets speak for themselves and Bernier's raising of Thunberg's mental condition is perfectly justifiable. Yes, it is. Her mental problems seem to be directly linked to the climate hysteria that she is pushing, he said. She admits that she is in a constant state of fear and panic and wants us to similarly panic in order to achieve the climate alarmist political goals she is fighting for. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, right? Here's Catherine Mckenna attacking Mr. Bernier. She says that a grown man, a conservative cabinet minister and almost party leader, no, he is a party leader, Miss Mckenna, could think that attacking a girl, mocking her mental health and her advocacy for climate action is acceptable politics is brutal. Call it out. We're better than this, Canada. Miss Mckenna and I responded to her. I said, you either didn't read or didn't understand what Mr. Bernier wrote. And she's linking to the Global News article, I'll note as well. So maybe she just didn't bother reading it, just believed the news. She paid for it after all, right? Her party. Glen Murray is attacking Mr. Bernier as well. He says, what is Maxime Bernier so afraid of? He fails to challenge one scientific fact or idea that Greta Thunberg is advocating for and then attacking her character and mental health. Hold on a second. I've just got this to show you. Yeah. Enova is reporting, climate activist Greta Thunberg can see invisible CO2. Yeah, this is real. Climate activist and school strike leader Greta Thunberg has the psychic, I guess that's what it says, psychic power to see invisible carbon dioxide, according to her mother. Greta doesn't make the claim, her mother does, just to make sure that's a clear distinction. The bizarre claim was made by the 16-year-old activist's mum, Milana Ernman, in the book Scenes from the Heart, a memoir about Greta's family, of which a preprint has already been made available. This was May of this year. The book, which is co-authored by Greta, her sister Bita, and father Svant, details the girls' troubled childhood after they were both diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, Asperger's, and Asperger's, a developmental disorder on the autism spectrum. Due to her eating disorder, I scroll down a little bit, we had to count the number of gnocchi balls on her plate to check if she would eat enough. It used to take her up to an hour to eat a third of a banana. According to Milana, Greta stopped going to school, was constantly crying, and only talked to her parents, sister, and one teacher. At the age of 11, she slipped into depression. Milana said her daughter only started to feel better when her family listened to her pleas that they needed to do more to help the Earth's climate. I scroll down again. According to Milana, Greta has the psychic gift of being able to see the colorless and invisible gas of carbon dioxide being emitted into the air. Milana wrote, she can see carbon dioxide with the naked eye. She sees how it flows out of chimneys and turns the atmosphere into a rubbish tip. So I don't think he needs to specifically call out one of her scientific facts or ideas because she's pushing alarmism. She says, I want you to panic, Glen. Are you panicking, Glen? She wants you to panic. That's the point. Hardly radical. Here's Mr. Bernier's final tweet on the subject, I believe, from earlier this morning. He says, 10:42 a.m., September 3rd, he says, climate alarmism equals panic, irrational fear. Let's have a rational discussion instead. And he says the same in French, I believe. And, well, this is the same clip that I've been showing you for most of this video. So do I support what Mr. Bernier said? Emphatically, yes. Thank you, Mr. Bernier, for standing up and saying it. It needed to be said. And Ms. Thunberg is more victim than being attacked here. And I think Mr. Bernier makes that clear. I don't think he's attacking her personally. I think that buying into the climate alarmism that she's pushing is irresponsible of the adults around her. It's irresponsible of the media. It's irresponsible of these acolytes, these hangers-on, these ministers and other people trying to shame Mr. Bernier into not speaking about this. This is necessary. This is part of the conversation. And the idea that as soon as he says anything about it, anything that you don't agree with, that's hate, or disagreeing with a consensus agreement is somehow hateful and needs to be banned. That's incredibly scary, incredibly draconian, and not at all appropriate to the country we live in. It's Canada. We have freedom of speech. We have democracy. We get to choose our leaders, and we get to, well, we used to have the freedom to speak our mind. And I hope that that will return post October 21st when these jokers are out of office. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca and have a wonderful, wonderful day.